a good one.
We have a great crowd here again today. I really appreciate everyone joining us. As John mentioned, we work hard to bring good content together. I've worked a lot on this presentation over the past month, fine tuning it. This dates back to, well, I guess maybe 10 years ago now, where the folks at Strategy and our team members were just debating about these different strategies, blue oceans, red oceans, low cost, differentiated, high end, low end. It just seemed like it was impossible to figure out like what strategy to use in what situation. And what we sought to do is to figure out, is there a model that explains what strategy should be used in a given situation? And that's what we're going to talk about today. We call it the growth strategy, the jobs done strategy matrix. We'll introduce each element of this as we go through it. It's really designed to help you improve and simplify strategy formulation. So as you're putting your product strategy together, you'll know that you're creating a strategy that's going to win in the market. Now, what you're going to learn here today is what strategy options exist. And as it turns out, there's not hundreds of them. There's really just a very small amount that can be explained through the jobs to be done lens. We're also going to talk about how you can discover under and overserved segments, customer population, because that's really key in formulating the right strategy. You have to know if the population that you're going after is underserved, overserved, combination of both, appropriately served, and it's going to make a difference in terms of what strategy you pick. Then, of course, what strategy should be deployed in a given situation? That's what we're going to answer. And then how do you deploy multiple strategies? And when should you deploy multiple strategies in order to gain a market leadership position across an entire market? And lastly, we'll finish it up with how to predictively create a disruptive innovation, which is a strategy introduced by Clayton Christensen back in his 1997 in his book, The Innovator's Dilemma. So let us get into it. I'm going to start with what product strategy options exist. Now, as I mentioned before, um, this could be very complicated, looking at it through multiple lenses, but we're going to look at it through one lens, the jobs to be done lens. Not surprisingly, right? We know that people buy products and services to get a job done. Now, this is a universal principle. It's an economic principle. It's a first principle. And I think all of you have heard about this, right? It's been made popular in the last number of decades by Theodore Levitt, who said people don't want a quarter-inch drill. What they want is a quarter-inch hole, right? They want to get a job done, which leads us to our next piece of our theory. Since people buy products and services to get a job done, it follows that winning products and services must help people get the job done either better and or more cheaply than competing solutions, right? So as a provider of products and services, your goal is to either create a product that gets the job done better and or more cheaply for the customers that you are targeting. So this means you have to know which customers you're targeting and whether they're underserved in the marketplace. So if that's the case, get a job done better and more cheaply. The options that are available to you can be called out in the jobs to be done strategy matrix. First off, we could apply a strategy where we do get the job done better. Better could be faster, more predictably, without defects, higher throughput, output, more convenient, more safe, but it's better along dimensions that people use to measure value in a product. But here you're charging more, right? So you don't have to charge less. You can get the job done better and charge more. You could also decide to get the job done better and charge less. And we'll get into all these in more detail. Another option, you could decide to get the job done more cheaply, but not better. It's actually done worse, but more cheaply. Another option might be get the job done worse, but we charge more. Now you may throw this and discount this one right off uh, your top of your head here, but this strategy is used quite frequently by companies. You can think of like mini bars in hotels, or concert tickets, or Wi-Fi in an airplane, where you're paying for service, uh, much more for service than you ordinarily would, and you're not getting quite the experience that you'd expect to get. So we're going to talk about all these different strategies. Now, what's interesting about them is they only win in certain situations, right? So if you want to get a job done better and charge more, that's only going to work if there are underserved customers willing to pay more, right? So you have to be targeting people who are underserved along some dimension. They're willing to pay more money to get the job done better. If if there is no customer population in your market that feels this way, then this would not be a valid strategy. Would fail, right? Another option, um, better and charge less. When does this win? Well, this wins all the time, right? This will help you win underserved customers who want to get the job done better. It'll help you win overserved customers who want to get the job done more cheaply. It's a great strategy. Another option, worse and charge less. This is a common approach as well, where you would win overserved customers that get the job done better than they need to and charge less for them. And also underserved non-consumers. So these are people who aren't paying for products to get the job done because they previously could not afford to, but now you're creating a solution that will bring non-consumers into the market because you've lowered the price point of entry so that now they can participate in the market with products and services. And the last one, worse, charge more. That only wins when there are customers with limited options. They're really in a difficult situation. So let's talk about how we should label them. When we think about how we should describe each of these strategies, we go back to theories that were laid out years ago. The very first one, winning underserved customers willing to pay more, we're going with the term the differentiated strategy. And this was made popular and introduced by Michael Porter back in the 1980s. And he didn't describe it as this, getting the job done better and charging more necessarily through a job speed on lens. But in effect, that's that's the approach, right? Differentiated. We want to make sure we are adding value to the offering in ways that customers find very valuable. So we're going to call that differentiated strategy. The second one we call a dominant strategy. This name comes from game theory, actually, where you're picking the strategy that will always win, right? And this will always win. It wins all type of customers. So if you can get the job done better and more cheaply, it wins over every segment in the market, whether they're overserved, underserved, or some combination of each. The next one, we go to Clayton Christensen's definition. We're going to call this a disruptive strategy, where you get the job done worse again, charge charge less as well, and this follows his terminology as he describes disruptive strategy and innovation back in his book, The Innovator's Solution and The Innovator's Dilemma. And the third one, we're going to call it a discrete strategy. This lives outside all the other strategies that exist. It's kind of a one-off. It can only occur when customers have limited options in the marketplace. All right, so we've laid out the key pieces. There's one more, the fifth, which is the sustaining strategy. It's right in the middle. What we say here is if people are already highly satisfied with the price and the performance of the product, it's really hard to go in any of those other directions. You kind of stay in the middle. And I think Porter talked about being stuck in the middle. It's not necessarily stuck here, right? But you're in a position where only minor incremental gains can be made on both sides of the innovation equation. So the question then is, if these are the strategies that exist and they only work in certain overserved, underserved situations, you have to ask the question, well, what types of segments exist in my market? Are there underserved customers? What percent of the market makes up underserved? What percent of the market is comprised of overserved customers? Maybe there's a combination where some segments are underserved along some dimensions and overserved along others. Or maybe they are just appropriately served across the board. Now, if we don't have the answer to this information, it's going to be really hard to apply the right strategy to the right situation. So, key question, how do you determine what under and overserved segments exist? And this is where we apply our outcome-driven innovation process approach. Many of you I know are familiar with it. And it begins by defining the market as the group of people trying to get the job done. We define the unmet needs as the outcomes they're trying to achieve when getting the job done. And then we seek to quantify those needs to see which ones are important and unsatisfied. Now, the goal here is to figure out which are unmet, right? So, are they overserved? Are they underserved? And we're going to define an underserved need as a need that's very important and not well satisfied. And an overserved need is one that's unimportant and very satisfied. Okay. Now, what we can do then is we can segment the market around these unmet needs to see if there are segments of customers that are underserved and overserved. And this will be the key to picking the right strategy. So from there, once you have those insights, you can match the strategy to the situation and be far more certain that your actions are going to lead to success in the market. When we go about and segment the market, we start by defining the job to be done, as we said, define the job steps, define the outcomes. We're going to segment around the outcomes. So when in this example here, this is surgeons removing an anatomical structure. You can see the steps associated with each um, uh, part of the job, establishing initial access, gaining visual access to the structure, defining the pathway, navigating through the structure, terminating the blood supply, and so on. Very specific steps. And underneath there are the outcomes, right? These are the metrics people use to measure success when getting the job done. And we're going to use these outcomes as the basis for the outcome-based segmentation. And what we want to figure out is along what dimensions are people underserved or overserved. In most markets, there may be 75 to 100 or more outcomes that describe success when getting the job done. And again, you can figure out are there segments that are underserved and along what dimensions or overserved and what dimensions. You can have a very precise strategy to act on and be successful in the marketplace. So the way we capture this and quantify it, we put surveys out to customers and we ask them, how important is it to you that you're able to, for example, minimize the time it takes to move an adjacent structure out of the visual field? And then how satisfied are you, given the solution you use today, with your ability to achieve that outcome? And here is where we can measure whether or not a need is very or extremely important or unimportant and very well satisfied. And this will lead us down the path to finding segments of people that have different unmet needs. So, for example, let's say there's 90 outcomes that we're segmenting around. A third of the sample could say outcomes number 10, 20, and 30 are highly underserved. So they get formed in a segment. Another third of the sample could say outcome number 40 is highly underserved, yet outcomes 50 and 60 are highly overserved. So they could go in a segment. Another third may say, outcome 70 is underserved, outcome 80 is overserved, outcome 90 is appropriately served. Now, you can imagine the complexity in doing this here, but what we're doing is we're just using factor and cluster analysis to come up with a number of segments that you get to choose with a 3, 4, 5 segment solution, and then profile them to see who's in those segments and to see whether they're underserved or overserved or some combination thereof. And that's what we're going to talk about. Now, before you segment, this is what companies typically would find if they ran this analysis before you segment. So if you take your 100% of your respondents, you often find that the market looks appropriately served. None of the needs are highly underserved, none of them are highly overserved. You're kind of in the middle. It looks like there's very little opportunity for improvement along any dimension, and that you should probably pursue a sustaining strategy. But theoretically, what could happen is half the market could think all these outcomes are very important, poorly satisfied, and the other half could think that they're all unimportant and very satisfied. Two very different segments of the population, one highly underserved, one highly overserved. Combine them together, they look like they just average each other out, right? So this is why we want to segment, right? And when we go to that next step and pick a 3-segment solution, and we're going to stick with the example, surgeons remove an anatomical structure, right? So what you're looking at here are the same 75-ish outcomes 3 times, but you see that they're plotted in different locations. Let's just track one outcome, right? Minimize the time it takes to move an adjacent structure out of the visual field. You can see in this segment, which is 57% of the customer population, this need is appropriately served. In 24% of the population, the very same outcome is highly underserved. In the same market, 19% of the respondents are saying the same outcome is overserved. Right? Now, how is this possible? Well, as it turns out, when you're trying to remove an anatomical structure, in many cases, the patient may not be obese. They have low comorbidities. They have no adhesions from previous surgeries. And in that case, getting this outcome satisfied is not that difficult. It's easy with today's solutions. But if the patient's obese, suffering from multiple comorbidities, have adhesions that are hard to get through, and to move the adjacent structures out of the visual field, could be highly underserved. Excuse me. Same outcome, underserved in certain segments, overserved in others, appropriately in yet another. All right. I can give you a few examples here. This is ophthalmologists who are trying to detect glaucoma, and you see this segment up in the far left, 21% of the population, highly overserved, while almost 80% of the market is highly underserved. Two very different views of the same market. And of course, as I'll show you, each requiring a very different strategy. This one here is an all-terrain vehicle manufacturer who sells vehicles that help outdoor workers navigate on off-road terrain. And you can see that two of the segments are appropriately served, and one segment is quite underserved along all these different dimensions. Right? Again, each of these segments will require a different type of strategy, but what we're trying to figure out right now is, what's this market look like? And then once we know what the market looks like, we can answer the question, what strategy should we employ in each situation? And what I love about this is the opportunities dictate the strategy. They tell you what strategy you should pursue. So, for example, when we look at this map on the left, the landscape, you can see that there's a segment of the population. There's maybe 25 unmet needs. It's a highly underserved segment. And let's assume for a minute they're willing to pay more to get the job done better. Now, if that's the case, you could target this segment with a differentiated strategy and it would work, right? Because these people are underserved, they're willing to pay more. If you could create a product that got the job done better along these dimensions, you'd have a great strategy. So you'd probably come up with the first version of the product that addressed this set of unmet needs, and then move on to the next version that addresses this next set, and so on, so that you're building competitive advantage that's sustainable over the years, because you're you're adding more and more value along the right dimensions, and differentiating in a way that's valuable to customers. It really is a unique and valued competitive position, and that's what you're seeking out. Number of success stories and that you've can imagine over the years of companies using strategies like this. What I like about the differentiated strategy, you don't have to win over a huge market share. So even if just 20-25% of the market is highly underserved, it's still a great target to go after. Dyson, for example, secured 24% market share, but 59% of the profit share in the market. Nest, similar, charging 7 times more than its competitors, had about 10% market share early on and 25% profit share. And Apple followed that same strategy early on. With 12% market share, they had a 70% profit share. This is the beauty. A lot of leverage if you go after that type of segment, if that segment exists. You can't pursue a differentiated strategy if there isn't a group of people that are highly underserved and willing to pay more to get the job done better, right? You could attempt to, and it would fail because there's no customer population that lines up with that um, with that dynamic. So we asked the question in the surveys. We asked, are people willing to pay more to get the job done perfectly? So in the surveys, we're asking this to see if customers will pay more, how much more. Um, and the reason we're doing this in the surveys is to have this piece of information as to whether or not a differentiated strategy is an option in an underserved segment. What we learned over the years is that it's not, right? So you may run into a situation that looks like this, but people aren't willing to pay more to get the job done better, which means you would have to come up with a solution that would satisfy these unmet needs, but the solution couldn't cost more. You'd have to charge the same or less in order to win in this situation. So this other piece of information, if they're willing to pay more or not, is critical in terms of positioning what strategy you might find yourself pursuing. The Again, the data leads the way. This comes from an insurance project that we worked on, where a segment of the population looked like this, where there were uh, some number of unmet needs where people wanted to get the job done better, and some set of overserved needs where they wanted to get the job done more cheaply. So the goal of the organization then became to pursue a dominant strategy that would do exactly that. Again, the opportunities are dictating what strategy you should go pursue. So you know where to create more value, you know where to reduce cost, you know how to pursue that strategy effectively. Companies that have done this, there's many examples, but Netflix is a great example of getting the job done better and more cheaply. Google AdWords is similar. Also, Kroll OnTrack, who we helped enter the electronic evidence discovery market, created a $200 million business by helping legal teams, get the job done better and more cheaply. They'd led in that space for 15 plus years. This one looks pretty obvious. What strategy would you pursue here? Well, this would be a disruptive strategy. You have a group of people that are highly overserved. So um, they're not looking for improvements in the product. They're just looking for cost reduction, right? That would be the right strategy in that situation. We see a lot of disruptive strategy successes over the years. Google Docs, Dollar Shave, Club, Crest White Strips, which I really like as an example, moving from having to go to dentist to get your teeth whitened for um, three, four, $500. You can just get your own white strips and do it yourself at home, which brought many more non-consumers into the marketplace. And then we have the discrete strategy as well. Again, this is where it's where there's a unique situation that exists in your market, where people have to get the job done, but they have very few options. They're left in a predicament, more or less. And we see a lot of companies apply this, and we've all experienced like airport beverages. Trying to get water. Once you cross security, the price goes up. 2, 3x all of a sudden. And outside of these examples here, you have hotels who charge more for last minute reservations, concert tickets for seats that you may not want, but you're paying a lot more for because uh, someone's adopted this strategy. You got mini bars, Wi-Fi I mentioned. So there's a lot of companies who apply this. You got to be very careful with this. You may have all heard about the EpiPen debacle years ago when the CEO decided just to raise prices dramatically in all situations, which turned out just to be a play for greed as opposed to creating value in a specific situation for the customers. And then there's the sustaining strategy. So in this case here, we would pick the sustaining strategy. You've got most of the market. The needs are very important, but they're already satisfied. There's little room for improvement along any direction. You have a little variability here. Maybe you get the job done slightly better along a few outcomes, maybe a bit more cheaply across a few outcomes, but there's little room for major change in any particular direction. So then the question becomes, now that I know how to do this for each segment, do I have different strategies for different segments? And how should I pursue those? The answer, of course, is if you want to lead the market and you want to play in every market segment who's trying to get the job done, then you may have to have different strategies for different segments. So This one, for example, here, this is back to surgeons removing the anatomical structure. The strategy that this company pursued is they took the products they currently had and improved them along some of those dimensions there that you can see that are slightly underserved right in here. And that was the product that they aimed at 57% of the market. They had then taken their previously sold product and then cost reduce it along certain dimensions so that they could lower the price, target that product at this segment, which had where they worked on patients that were not obese, they didn't have comorbidities, they did not have adhesions. The job was easy to get done. So they came up with a lower cost solution for that situation. At the same time, they invested in new solutions that would get the job done better in that most difficult situation where patients were obese, suffering from multiple comorbidities with adhesions, which were made it significantly harder to get the job done. So if you want to play in the entire market, you need to know what types of segments exist and decide whether or not you want to pursue different strategies for different segments to be effective in each. This one here, you would, as we talked about before, pursue a disruptive strategy for this group in the upper left, but you pursue a differentiated strategy for this group at the 80 or 79% of the market that's highly underserved. Right? So you're pursuing multiple strategies. In this case, you have that pink segment, purple one, that's so highly underserved that if you satisfy half of their unmet needs, you would also satisfy half of the unmet needs of the other 45% segment. So you're really getting a 2-for-1 here. The same strategy could be applied across multiple segments and be effective. Okay? And again, this is what the data is telling you. This market here, this was the all-terrain vehicle manufacturer, where they ended up following sustaining strategies in these two segments where they already had 50+% market share. In this other segment, they had just 5% market share. This turned into a $150 million opportunity for them. People did not want to pay more to get the job done better. It turns out this was a group of people who were using the vehicle more like a workhorse. They didn't want all the bells and whistles that were included on some of those other vehicles, and they didn't want to pay more. They wanted a stripped down version with more power so they could traverse difficult areas more effectively and efficiently. And that was their goal. So that's how you'd win each segment in the market once again. And I think this example illustrates what we're talking about quite perfectly. How Uber has proceeded over the years to pursue really all of these strategies at the same time, right? They started with Uber Select, which was differentiated strategy, premium rides and high-end cars. Then they added Uber X, which went after the bulk of the market to get the job done better and more cheaply, as they describe it, better, faster, cheaper than a taxi. That was exactly what they were trying to do. They added Uber Pool, which got the job done worse, but they could charge less. So people have to share a ride, may take a bit longer, may not get the vehicle you're looking for, but you get there and you're paying a lot less than would have otherwise. And they also employed the discrete strategy in their surge pricing. So if you're leaving a concert, you're leaving a baseball game, you need a ride, the demand is huge, the supply is limited, they raise prices and profits in that particular situation. So again, this points out, Uber's products attack the taxi business from all different angles. There's multiple strategies that are being pursued simultaneously. There's under and overserved segments that are being addressed. People who are willing to pay more being addressed. Those who are willing to pay less are being addressed. And non-consumption is also being addressed, which is a great way to go, right? So this is covering 100% of the market, so you can be a market leader. And this is often what it takes. So thinking you could pursue one strategy and win is generally not the case. And if you want to be the high-end player and pursue a differentiated strategy, you have to make sure there's a segment of people with unmet needs, and you have to satisfy those needs along the right dimensions. So what we say here is once you know what outcome-based segments this is and which outcomes are underserved, You can pick the right strategy, right? Pick the strategy that's certain to connect with the customers in each segment. In the last section here, I want to include how does this work to create a disruptive innovation? Because I know this is a goal of many organizations as well. Christensen made this quite popular in his books. Um, but what we discovered is this model explains pretty nicely how the low end disruption actually works. And many of you may be familiar with this, but the goal was with this low end disruption, it describes this process by which a product or service takes root initially in the way Clay describes it, in simple applications at the bottom of the market, and then relentlessly moves up market, eventually displacing established competitors. So I think the model does a pretty nice job of describing um, the bottom of the market down here, where you pick this disruptive strategy with your product, you win these overserved customers, and then over time, your product is satisfying more and more needs until eventually it's you're pursuing a dominant strategy where you're winning overserved customers and underserved customers. And this really is the process of moving up market. But what I wanted to mention is that it's not as simple as it looks. There's one key element here that has to come into play before you can pursue a disruptive innovation or achieve one. So let's delve into that for a second. So first off, you are starting with a disruptive strategy, right? Low end of the market, pay less, get the job done worse. Now, the key here is you have to be using a disruptive technology. It's usually a software platform, or it could be a hardware platform that facilitates or enables the process of disruption to occur. In other words, the platform or the solution that you're using uh, can't be constrained in such a way that you can't improve it. It has to facilitate the improvement over time. And if it does, then the process of disruption can be completed. So this happens over some period of time again, where initially it's down in the disruptive strategy, but now you're pursuing a dominant strategy, getting the job done better and cheaper. So this is the process of the disruption. It's when disruptive innovation, I should say, is when this process is complete. And to illustrate the example here, uh, people often throw out the question: is Uber a disruptive innovation? Well, the quick answer is Uber is a company, not a product. So Uber as a company is not a disruptive innovation. Uber Pool is the only Uber product that was designed to get the job done worse and more cheaply. So then the question would be, is Uber Pool a disruptive innovation? So let's take a look at that. Well, Uber Pool starts down here, right? Employs a disruptive strategy aimed at the bottom of the market, gets the job done worse, but charged less. But the product is not conceived around a disruptive technology. You can't take that concept and keep moving it up market. Right? It's always going to be a worse, far worse solution. It's not going to get better and better because you're pulling people, right? So the mechanism for moving up market isn't available, which means that Uber Pool is not a disruptive innovation. It does follow a disruptive strategy. So making those distinctions and understanding that even if you start down low, it doesn't mean that product's going to take over the market. You'd have to think through well in advance how you're going to architect that solution to pursue that disruptive strategy to make sure that you can keep moving up market with the same platform that you started out with. Much more difficult uh, than it sounds in theory. Question is Zoom a disruptive innovation? Well, let's take a look at that. So we're all on this tool, right? The initial product employed a disruptive strategy. I think the initial product was free, right? If I recollect that correctly. So it got the job done worse, but it was free. And then over time, it got the job done better and better. So the product is conceived around a disruptive technology. It's a software platform. The mechanism for moving up market is available. New product improvements have been getting the job done better and better over time. So we would say Zoom is a disruptive innovation in the process of moving up market. So that draws a distinction of how you should think about going from a disruptive strategy to a dominant strategy over time and creating that sustainable competitive advantage. So with that, so let's talk about the key takeaways. Are we on time? Not bad. Key takeaways. We learned that, of course, people buy products and services to get a job done better and or more cheaply. Better again, faster, more predictably, more convenient, safer, right? All those different terms that people use to describe what better might mean. While some customers may want to get the job done better, others may want to get it done more cheaply, right? Some may be willing to pay more, some may not be willing to pay more, right? Knowing what under and overserved segments exist in the market is the key to knowing which strategies you want to pursue. Otherwise, you just be guessing. And the chances of you guessing what under and overserved segments exist and along what dimensions, guessing that right is near impossible. That's why going with a data-driven approach is really critical to making this successful. We've learned that choosing the right strategy to pursue in each target segment will vastly improve your chances for success. And it's really the opportunities themselves that are dictating the strategy, right? So you can look at the data and you know what you have to go do in order to win. You know that correctly choosing and deploying multiple strategies offers a path to market leadership. So you're not just targeting 20% of the market, you can target 100% of the market with different solutions aimed at different under and overserved segments. Then lastly, understanding the dynamics of disruptive innovation helps guide growth through time. If you understand that mechanism, how it works and how it moves up market, you're in a much better position to try to achieve a disruptive innovation and contemplate it and plan it from the start, from scratch. I think, John, you already covered some of this here, but we just want to wind up. I know people may want to get more information about the products, and I think we're still giving away books too, right?
Yeah, if you want to go back to that previous slide, Tony,
Sure.
again, thank you. I I knew the content going into this, and hearing you do it again, this is graduate level course that we just gave away for free. Like this, I truly believe that this course is worth thousands of dollars of what you just gave away. This is 30 years of studying product successes, product failures, and putting it into a framework to break this down into steps. So I just can't thank you enough for putting this together and sharing this with our community. And then, as a reminder, for those of you who want to learn how to do this, we do train teams how to build an innovation capability. You can you can email us at info@stratagen.com. We can train your team. If you're an individual on a team, we also have our ODI Pro platform. That's on our website that you can look to do. And then we also do this for organizations. If you would like us to sit in the captain seat and bring you along and show you and conduct the research and build the strategies for you, that's our bread and butter. We've been doing that for over 30 years. And you can email us at info@stratagen.com to do that. If you haven't already, Tony, the next slide, if you already haven't downloaded the book, Tony goes into much greater detail. This resource is also for free. You can get this at jobstobedonebook.com if you already haven't downloaded that, or if you've downloaded it. I encourage you to read that. This information is in there, and we walk through step by step how to do that.